Before we start, I just wanted to say that I think just what happened there when Anuj just like surfaced the lack of transparency, that's exactly the kind of thing that leads to the emergence of good protocols. And I think that's one of the main takeaways from Fran and my experiences in different communities and decentralized networks, is actually like saying the uncomfortable thing and being vulnerable and having the network actually shape itself and self-evolve is how we make these decisions. So keep it coming.
Great. So we decided yesterday, also quite late, that it would be interesting for us to share a few examples and experiences that we've had in different communities that we're part of, because we thought it could be a useful input for the discussions here that are also really not very technical and very grounded just in, let's say, a bit under a decade of experience and practicing. So basically, we're just going to actually highlight 5 different key questions that we've been grappling with in these communities that we're part of, and some of the answers to the questions that we've tried to find, but also really just them being still very big open questions that we're working on. And we definitely realized that we could talk for hours and hours about this topic, so we really tried to just pick a few aspects, knowing that there's a lot more there that we could go into in one-on-one conversations. So I'm going to start really briefly just saying a few words about WeShare, which is sort of the core community that I've been practicing in for the past 7 years. And so it's basically a distributed global network of people that originally came together because they were interested in the sharing economy, but it evolved quite a lot. There's lots of different subjects that people in that community work on, among them the future of work. But what I really wanted to highlight is actually just WeShare's core values that have also iterated, but basically now you can sum them up as 5 simple values, which are permanent beta, doocracy, which is sort of rooted in like action and just legitimacy by doing, openness, collaboration, and care. And so that community is really what has been my main learning ground, but also a bunch of other networks that I'm part of. And most recently, I just wanted to mention a super interesting experiment that was started by DAOstack to start their own DAO called Genesis Alpha that I've also been helping facilitate. So that's sort of a more current place where there's some experiences that have informed these questions.
And wasn't there like an experiment between DAOstack and WeShare?
Yeah, I'll mention that in one of the points.
Okay, yes. And the other community we wanted to draw examples, like governance experiments examples from, is Inspiral. Maybe just put your hand up if you know what Inspiral is or have heard about. Okay, oh, great. That's great. Okay, well, for those of you who don't know, it is a decentralized network or collective of freelancers and entrepreneurs that started 8 years ago in New Zealand, and it's evolved into a global collective. And on that journey of 8 years, we've developed social protocols, also some online platforms and tools like Lumio and CoBudget. And all of those have been developed by the community, self-organizing, self-governing, going through the painful process of deliberative decision-making and experiments, some of which failed and some of which have been painful, and some of which have been great and had great outcomes and protocols that we can now share with all of you.
Great. Phoebe, do you want to kick us off?
Let's see. So number 1, decided last night at midnight, we thought we wanted to talk a bit about how in these networks we've seen one challenge that comes up is, okay, you've got this decentralized network of people who are all trying to coordinate and work together, but how do you actually support that interconnectivity? And what's like the minimum, we're kind of aiming for a minimum viable structure to enable emergence, kind of what UV was hinting at, like how can we leave these infrastructures open to allow emergence without tipping into chaos? And actually I think there's a lot of tensions that we have to balance throughout all of these examples. One of them is this chaos and emergence, or like infrastructure for emergence. Another one is scale versus trust. Another is form versus freedom. And I think these are like themes that we've experienced like in our practice and in our practical experiences. So this one, this kind of minimum viable centralization that allows emergence and coordination. In Inspiral, we had an experiment that has iterated over the years where originally there were no leaders, there's no management structure, but you'll talk about that in a second. But we decided to create a new role called catalysts. So these were, instead of having bosses or managers, we thought, okay, what we actually need is people who have been explicitly given power and responsibility to have higher context than everyone else, so that they're able to connect together, people with each other, with opportunities, with, to have that overview on the network. So actually we found it very helpful that some people do have more power than others. But the way that we kind of minimize this or make sure that power pyramids don't aggregate over time is by putting a time limit on that role. So 6 months or a year, a bit like democracy, but that's been really helpful.
Yeah, and one thing that's quite a challenge with this is actually how do you fund that kind of role? So there's been different iterations of this. And just as an example, in WeShare, we've also gone through 2 different versions, where a few years ago, there was sort of this role of global coordination and global community to sort of do that cross-pollinating and connection. And it turned out that was not sustainable at all, also personally and in terms of the amount of work that was focused on very few individuals. So we actually just dissolved it and sort of decentralized it and decided to test what does it look like if it's just part of our culture that we all do that work. But that also is still a little bit too loose. So I think the catalyst idea really is interesting, sort of in between, but it's still an ongoing challenge.
We have 3 minutes for 4 more patterns.
So to bridge with that, we can keep it quicker. There's really this perpetual question of how much structure is enough structure, and how can we really keep the agility and not keep creating more bureaucracy over time. And one of the things that Inspiral actually has is called the minimum viable board, which is a board that really just has very, very few activities in terms of ensuring that the organization is, financially in an okay state and that basic things are covered. But it really doesn't do any decision making, and it just helps support the network take care of itself.
Yeah. Moving on to that, another one that is often not really discussed and took Inspiral quite a long time relatively to realize is really important is care. When you have these platforms and you've got people, collaborating over long distances and often just maybe calling in alone from their room with a laptop, there's not usually space or awareness brought to how do we take care of each other? How do we make sure people are thriving and that well-being is at the center of what we're doing? So one pattern that we've developed over the years is the idea of annual retreats, so having 2 per year, everybody gathering together and actually having that space completely work-free and holding kind of deep connection space for, deep circle time for people to actually talk about their dog dying or their sickness or what they're struggling with or mental health issues and how can we be there for each other. And the other pattern is a more decentralized form of care, which is an interesting model called stewardship. So the way that's actually emerged over multiple iterations is that each person in the network stewards someone else. So that's I steward Fran stewards Rich stewards Susan, and it goes round in a circle. And the idea there is that every 2 weeks or month, everybody kind of self-organizes and decides it with their own steward. You have a check-in and just ask how are you doing? How's it going? And in conflict mediation, that also comes in really helpful because you might want to bring in your stewards if you're having a conflict with someone to help you both mediate that conflict.
So another really juicy question is, should we and how do we measure value and work? So it actually connects directly with this question of care, because care work is often quite invisible, and it's not actually taken into account in how we distribute the value and the funds maybe that we have. So there's actually been quite a few different experiments that we've done in WeShare around that. One of them actually was with the precursor to DAO Stack called Backfeed, where we were trying to start measure contributions, and it had a lot of backlash and has always run into a lot of friction. And most communities I've been part of always want to introduce a reputation system in the beginning when they start connecting, and then they tend to let go of that idea, which I just have as an interesting observation that I've seen happen quite a few times. But that's really something that I think is also really relevant to all the things we're going to talk about here. And the last one that I also have been really thinking about a lot lately is this question and challenge of how we can have enough alignment and focus of attention within these networks. Because something we're really grappling with is how do we have this diversity of projects and many different things people are doing, but also really focus our energy like Theo was asking us all to do, to actually have a bigger impact. And that's something that we've just seen over the years has been really, really hard for us to do. So it's really an open question of what are different ways we can try to do that.
Yeah, I think just to wrap up, I would say like governance, in our opinion, is a journey and not a destination. A good governance is always evolving. It's always based on experiments and sense making and sensitivity to the system. And when people come to us and are like, oh, so what's the pattern that you use in Inspiral, or how do you do this? It's like, well, yeah, it's a process of actually discovering what's most appropriate in that context. But if you have any questions, we're both around and happy to be in the open spaces. So thanks very much.
Thank you.